I tell you about that voicemail, let me tell you about another important concept, and that's the concept of translation. We work with people on these workshops on this differentiating value, and the way the workshops work is we sit down with several of the executives in a room, generally for an afternoon, and we get them to identify the 2 or 3 most important things about their company that either they're unique or they do demonstrably better than anybody else. I will tell you, it is a difficult exercise for people in their own organizations to figure out what they're best at and then be able to articulate it in a way as in terms of its consequences. It's not easy. So if you can't do it, if people can't do it in their own companies, how do you think your customers are going to do it? How do you think your customers are going to translate the impact and the consequences of not having you in their life? So what this idea of translation does is it takes the intellectual concept of consequences and explains it with some emotional impact. See, if you can't articulate your differentiating value in the marketplace, you are going to be forced to compete on price. When you compete on price, 2 things happen. Number 1, you have to change your cost structure. If you're going to have lower prices, you've got to change your cost structure. Or number 2, you're going to have to exit the market, or exit that market segment. And as they say in the Wall Street Journal, you will be free to pursue other opportunities because you will no longer have a company. Differentiating value, what you do that distinguishes you from your competitors. What you do differently is the basis for determining your differentiating value. Now, do you have this affliction or disease or whatever you want to call it? I like to call it disease because it's kind of self. So let's self-diagnose. Do you find yourself competing on price more often than you'd like to? Do you have to discount to get the business? Do you find your sales cycle long and getting longer? Do you just struggle to articulate your differentiating value? Your buyer does not understand the economic consequences of not having you in their life, and worse, you don't either. So if you provide any of these in any way, shape, or form in the marketplace, being able to articulate your differentiating value is truly a very important part of your business. It will raise your sales. It will raise your margins. I will tell you one other thing that also will happen initially, which is a little bit of a negative thing. Because sometimes you got to slow down to speed up. Once you go through this, figuring this thing out, and then you take a look at your prospect pipeline, it's going to shrink. And here's why it's going to shrink. There are people in your prospect pipeline who shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be there, number 1, because they're not the ones who are going to suffer the consequences of not having you in your life. Number 2, they're probably not ones that are willing to pay you for your differentiating value.